So you engage in, you look at early startups, right? What do you look for in a startup, and why? Why do you what points do you specifically point on? Like the rule of three, what are the three things you're looking for?
So I guess the way that I think about this is sort of my firm's investment criteria, which is typically a little bit later side of early stage, which is Series A and B level. We look for companies that operate in B2B sectors that are deep technology and frontier healthcare. And the one thing we look for that's a little bit of a unique part of our mandate is that we will not invest unless the company has a gender diverse founding team with at least one female founder with equal equity representation on the cap table. So all you ladies, stay in touch.
So John, tell us a little bit about the technology that you invest in, a little bit more about that.
So we're a seed stage investor. So normally sort of first check is 400 to 700,000 at 10% of a company. So sort of a stage a little bit earlier. And at that stage, most of the themes we end up investing in really have not developed into sort of mature spaces where there's a lot of companies you can look for. And so, though we have a thematic approach, we definitely are open to things that are outside of our core. But our core today is applied AI, drones and robotics, and fintech. And we're leaning particularly into fintech at the moment because we think there's some interesting things going there. We're closing tomorrow on our 6th drone company. We think it's a really interesting space, whilst everyone at the moment thinks it's kind of boring. And I don't think we've announced this, so don't tweet it out, but we invested in our first biotech company, which is a lab-grown meat company, which is really interesting. We can dig into that later, but that's just sort of like way out of the center of the freeway of what we do.
Okay, a little news there. Well, tell us about Vendorful, not Wonderful over there.
Well, I'm not sure that's going to be terribly interesting. It's most important for me to tell you guys I'm one of them, but I'm more one of you. So I am a startup founder. I'm a multiple-time startup founder, and I put some money to work. Vendorful, just real briefly, we make software to help companies run procurement, like strategic sourcing and manage all the vendor data and everything else. If your eyes are glazed over, you should know the legal name of the company is Boring But Great, and it's a good thing I'm married because I would not be able to meet a woman and get her to go out on a date with me if I told her I made procurement software. So that's Vendorful. On the investment side, my investment committee is my wife and me. We are not thesis driven. We're thesis informed, so I tend to like to invest where I can add value. That's usually SaaS, B2B enterprise software. I've been swayed by things where I either think that there's a social good. I have strong belief in the founders, and also a combination where I have strong belief in the founders and I think there's a social good. So I will stray from the path every now and then, but yeah, that's the rule of thumb.
So what personality traits do you look for in entrepreneurs? Is there something that specifically stands out when you finally hone in on a company you want to invest in? This question's for any of you three.
Coachability is something that's really important to us because being aware of the fact that you don't know what you don't know is not something that's inherent in a lot of the entrepreneurial DNA. But the fact of the matter is, especially when you're entering the venture landscape and raising VC dollars for the first time or going into a new market or exploring a new geography, there's a lot that goes into that. And the way that we try to work with our founders is very hands-on and being actionable. Won't invest unless we can add significant value beyond the capital contribution. But that can't be the case unless we can say, hey, listen up, there's something here that we see, we have our pattern recognition of, looking at thousands of deals a year, and there's something here that we really believe in, but if you could just hone this one sort of part of your messaging or your go-to-market or your revenue model, this is, we really believe believe that we can, together kind of take this to the next level. So in my mind, ability to sort of evolve, adapt, and, be resilient, obviously, in the nature of the entrepreneurial journey, and tenacious and gritty and all those other things. But again, really ability to sort of work and accept, feedback and insights from other types of people is important for us.
I think that's, a key critical trait and something which is so important. In addition, I think one of the things that's important is that the founder is passionate about what they do. And we have this phrase where we say that, all successful entrepreneurs are delusionally optimistic about their space. They believe they can change the world, make millions of people behave differently, doing whatever it is they're doing, whether it's, Travis with Uber or whatever it may be. You think through these things, they're really at the, the point of this shit, delusionally optimistic. However, not everyone who's delusionally optimistic is a successful entrepreneur. And so you have to be careful not to back the crazy ones.
Right.
But back the crazy ones. And that's the difference.
So it's interesting to hear. I had a chat today with one of the, one of my portfolio companies. I sound like an asshole saying that. Company I've invested in, she just closed first major deal. She's had a few smaller ones. She's now into 6 figures ARR. And I said, "Do you remember what I told you?" And she said, "Yeah." I said, "What are the three attributes about being an entrepreneur?" So I thought this was fun because you said delusionally optimistic. So trait number 1 is arrogance, because if you're not arrogant, you're not going to get started, because you have to think that you've come up with an idea that no one else has, or the idea is out there, but you're just so good, you're going to out-execute everybody and do it better, right? So if you don't have that, you don't get started. Then the next thing is you need the delusional optimism. We're going to have the hockey stick in a year, because if you don't have delusional optimism, you're not going to want to suffer. You're not going to want to deal with it. And then the last and most important one is persistence. And so the thing I look for in entrepreneurs is their ability to eat shit. Because if you can't do that, you have no business doing a startup. And I've told people that directly. I've had people actually leave startup land and go take corporate jobs and call me later and thank me that they didn't have what it, and it's not a judgment, right? I mean, I don't fit in corporate America. I say shit and fuck too much. But, other people do great there. Just, you have to figure out who you are. And if you are willing to suffer, you can be you can potentially be a good entrepreneur. Your willingness to suffer will not overcome a bad idea or bad execution, though. So that's the other thing you have to take into consideration.
Yeah, and to give a sense of that, I saw with one of our CEOs today. They've raised a bunch of money over the years and through Series B or whatever, and they're down to they're missing numbers this year dramatically, and they're down to just a couple million in the bank. Where a company with burn like this is kind of like, okay, that's that's concerning. And I get a text, "Oh yeah, we just signed this LOI for 160 million in revenue over the next 3 years." So it's that. It's the resilience to deal with, I've got all this pressure, the money I've raised, things are falling apart, and then pulling a rabbit out of the hat on the same day. And that, and so it's, I say as an investor, you almost have to be bipolar. Companies are great, terrible, great, and that can be in the same week, same day, And then we have LPs, and all they want to hear is, you paid 1 and you sold it for 30. And they, the zigzags in between, you kind of need to insulate them from, because otherwise they will be bipolar.
So David, I would be amiss if I didn't tell you eating shit in Miami means wasting time. So you might want to use that on a panel in Miami. But anyway, how do you guys even try to predict the future in a world where we have trouble predicting what's going to happen tomorrow? No one predicted the rise of Trump. We watch Fortune 500 companies stumble very publicly. We're watching whole sectors disappear. Half of Manhattan storefronts are empty. How do you guys even begin to know what's going to happen tomorrow, never mind in 3 years?
What do you mean no one predicted the rise of Trump?
If you look at the polling,
Well,
no,
the polling is an average of an average of an average, right? And you're not, our business is not about averages. They're not Gaussian distributions. So, you know, let's take some stats. If you have an average VC portfolio and you equal weight your money into each company and you make one investment at the seed round, so think about it, then a third of your companies are going to go bankrupt. A third of your companies are going to go nowhere. The last third will generate some return. And a third, or 10% of your portfolio will generate 85% of your return. So a couple of things from this. One is you have to have enough companies in the portfolio that you capture that 10% statistically. Secondly, if you have too many companies, you're going to be a medium performer in a space where the return dispersion is very wide and you want to be top quartile. Everybody wants to be top quartile, everyone says they are, they're not. And then the next thing is don't equal weight. Right? So if a company is failing, don't give them more money. You know, use the sort of capitalist part of being a venture capitalist and give more money to the companies that succeed and less to the ones that don't. And that's the game. The problem is the game is so long term that you don't even know if you're good at it until after you've retired. I mean, no, the performance metrics and stuff in this space is ridiculous. But that's the data. And so against that kind of data, averages aren't part of it. Let's start thinking about, you know, how we predict stuff. And I think it was easier a decade ago than it is today, because I think that the tech stacks we're dealing with are much more complex. And they depend on fundamental inventions happening. And there's no law about how frequently fundamental inventions can happen. You know, if you're in the blockchain space, you have to believe people can invent something to actually make this useful. Sorry for anyone here who's at the church of blockchain. But you know, so much money and intellectual capital in the space, you have to believe someone will, but there's no law that says that. Whereas the venture capitalists of past could ride Moore's law and Metcalfe's law around some predictability. But it's very clear that AI is making the larger tech companies much stronger, and they will dominate consumer products. Therefore, VCs have veered much more to enterprise because generally Apple and Google and Amazon and the like aren't selling in to every space within the enterprise, and so there's many opportunities around that. You know, this meat company we invested in, you know, we look at it and we go, if they can make the tech work, then it is a very big market, and it's a great team, and we're backing a team, all of the things we talked about team before. But the price point still needs to be reduced by 2 orders of magnitude. But the end result is really interesting. You end up with a supply chain free of antibiotics, free of hormones, free of disease, and you can grow any meat. So who wants to eat giraffe? Who wants to eat elephant? You know, I mean, you start thinking about it, it gets really interesting. You know,
legal cannibalism?
well, so
Who wants to eat my right arm?
well, so the question is, like, would you want a, you know,
David steak.
I was going to say a Trump steak or a Bernie burger.
those are already available in Trump
Yeah.
states, yeah.
The problem with a Bernie burger is it always leans to the left. But you know, but the point is, it's actually, once you start thinking about it, when we think about drones, we're in a whole series of drones. We're in stratospheric drones that sit 11 miles up. We're in drones that deliver hamburgers. Food. We always have a food focus here. We're in, you know, we're in drones that deliver the post. We're in drones that do surveys. So you know, across the board, because we think that the economics behind this are so significant in these industries that the regulations have to allow it, and we also believe the tech stacks will get there. But there we're riding much more of a Moore's law tech stack with regard to reliability and with regard to the things that need to be put in place so these things don't every day drop out of the sky and kill But yeah, it's you're really using your imagination about where you think things are going to go and whether the company and the team can drive that stuff. And sometimes you're right, often you're wrong. As long as you're right more than 10% of the time, you're doing good.
I think one of the things I look for when trying to build your little window into the future is a company identifying an undeniable shift that's happening in some ecosystem right now. So a lot of times, companies will come and they'll, spend so much time on the problem and exactly what they're trying to solve, but the real big question in this industry for both founders and funders is timing. So why now? And why now is something, again, that you sort of predict for the next, few years to come. And I think one of the things that's making the prediction of the future challenging now is that the pace of change, especially with, significant improvements in machine learning, is really saying, okay, maybe what we're doing now is not going to be relevant 10 years from now because there will be some, massive, inflection point in Moore's Law or some other type of solution. So one thing I kind of look for is say, okay, is there a big bottleneck? Is there, there's a lot of people that come and they're just like, oh, parents are really busy and they spend 30 minutes talking about how that's such a problem. It's like, all right, we get it. Parents have a lot to do, but why, what is your exact solution? Why does it matter, and why will it matter in the future? And I think, again, the big why now and the timing of it is something that will matter in terms of predicting the future. But with those bottlenecks, there has to be a really, really, really valid use case for not only today, but something that is going to be somewhat static. So there's no easy way to do it, and as John mentioned, the metrics are kind of bleak. So predicting the future is not a science. This is a lot about sort of qualitative assessments and more of an art in more ways than one. Is saying, okay, I'm betting on the founder who will be able to withstand the rapid evolution of whatever industry they're facing, but de-risking that in any way you can is what you have to focus on. So how thoughtful they are about their approach and the real problem they're going out to solve, and why does it need to be? What you love to see is like this aha moment that comes immediately when you're like, why does that not already exist yet? Because those kinds of things, again, are, we are just sort of in a market that's still maturing and catching up. So, we look at this space right now and we're doing an autonomous electric vehicle investment. So, when they're saying, okay, we're cutting costs by 60%, increasing productivity by 200% and decreasing carbon emissions by 90%, those are things that we say, all right, there's a pretty clear case for this being, having some traction in the near future.
Do you have a humorous expletive-filled answer there, David?
I actually want to, I'll keep my F-bombs in my back pocket for now. I want to turn this around the other way, right? Because it's, from the perspective of the investor, Haley talked about pattern matching. It's a lot of what this is. But it's really on the entrepreneurs to predict the future and then sell that. And you have to realize, this is an early stage investing panel and beyond, that when you are predicting the future as an entrepreneur, and you're going to pitch, VCs in particular, angels to some degree, but especially VCs, there's not a lot of data. And so it's a lot like going out on a first date. Is there chemistry, is there magic? You might find somebody on a first date who meets all your criteria and checks all the boxes, and you go, and there's just, okay. And other times you'll meet somebody, and it's not what you thought you were looking for, but it's exactly what you want. And that is the experience that if you guys go out to raise venture money, you will undoubtedly have. I've had 2 occasions where I predicted the future correctly, and I have 0 to show for it monetarily. In 1994, I had this vision. This is, I think, Netscape 1.0 or 0.9 had been rolled out. I had this vision that people were going to look for jobs online. I spent like $1,000, because that's what it cost back then, to get the domain name jobhunt.com. I didn't know how to write code, I didn't know anything else, and it just did nothing. And a few years later, it's Monster, Hot Jobs, all this other stuff. So I learned how to program. I went through a pretty crappy 20s and decided I was going to do another startup. And I had this vision for online video, and I built a site called Vlogville. Vlogville, tell me if this sounds familiar, is a video site where you can go and upload your own videos and find other videos you like and tag them until you like. And I went to VC after VC after VC, and they basically told me, in kinder words, this is stupidest fucking thing I've ever heard. I still have my rejection letter from Mark Cuban, which, I sent him a follow-up after I sold what Vlogville turned into. There's a guy now who's a successful venture capitalist at the time. He's finding himself, named Mike Maples. And Mike called me and he said, hey, David, Mike was an investor in a company called Odeo, which was a transformational podcast company. Then Apple launched a free podcast application. They said, we're going to do something else. That something else was Twitter. And so that ended up okay for them. And Mike called me, he's like, oh, there's this company, YouTube. So I typed the letter U and the word tube. I'm like, nothing. And he's like, Y-O-U. I'm like, oh, that's stupid. No one's going to want to spell that out. And I look at it, I'm like, they have like 2% of the features that we have. And look at all this pirated content. Then Lazy Sunday, pirated content from Saturday Night Live went viral. And I basically said, I'm going to build a B2B product based on the technology that I've already created. So you can predict the future. You have to be able to sell that to somebody. Selling that to somebody is a function of your ability to sell. But as much as anything else, it's a function of your ability to just have enough meetings to find somebody with whom you have chemistry. And so all of these things have to fall into place. This is a really, really hard thing that you guys are thinking about doing. It's an admirable, noble, wonderful thing, but it's really hard. And you cannot let, no necessarily mean you should stop. On the other hand, if you get enough no's, maybe your idea is terrible, you're not going to know until you have the benefit of hindsight.
Yeah. I'm sorry, go ahead.
Well, I would love to just push back on one point, as you mentioned, the volume of meetings to be able to get to the yes. And one thing that I've seen lately is a lot of entrepreneurs, they're going out and they're building these infographics. They're like, well, I went on 700 plane rides and I wrote 100,000 emails and I spent 90 million hours to raise like 300K. And my response to that is like, I feel so sorry that you wasted that much time, energy, and money when it's quite simply a sales process where you build a pipeline and a funnel and then you get to those really target leads that are willing to convert. Yes, you have to cast a wide net because there will be many, many, many more no's than there are yeses. And having champions that are talking about you in the room when you're not there is something that's critically important. But I think when you are a founder and raising venture is not the only route, which is something that we've talked about, but if you do choose to go and buddy up with a VC, which is very much a relationship-driven business, then again, to get to that point, you should not, you should almost be protective of your information and your secret sauce and your time and energy, because capital is a commodity at this point in time if you have a business that's valuable enough or you can sell it well enough. And it's really, people should be lucky to have access to your cap table, and it should not be the other way around, that you're going out and having to really sit and pray and beg for a check. Because if you can sell it and if you can message something and you have a clear enough ability to communicate effectively, then you will have things coming more inbound and have the ability to say, oh my gosh, this is such a small and incestuous industry. We'll always go up and say, oh my god, I just talked to these guys, have you seen this deal yet? So a lot of times there's a virality and like this FOMO power that comes with it. But I think if you're going to talk to an investor, you shouldn't just talk to someone because they're an investor, because many times, more times than not, you're probably going to be smarter than them and know a lot more about what you're building and your baby and your sort of secret sauce. So I think to be really cognizant about who you're sharing with and who you're having conversations with and who you're spending time with, because a lot of in many cases, if you're just going and sort of asking for advice or just having more of a casual kind of setting and not like, hey, a formal pitch, I'm here asking for money, like that's a better way to get a no, rather than if you say, hey, I'm here and I'm not raising yet, maybe I will be one day, they'll be much more likely to ask to write you a check right on the spot.
Okay, can I really quickly comment?
Please.
I appreciate that you thought it was pushback. I actually agree with you 100%. If I find out somebody has 700 meetings, that's a horrible return on invested time, and like you're doing something wrong. Let me just, because you're talking about some numbers, just more realistic numbers. So I have a friend, his company is going to go public this year, 30 meetings to get 1 yes. I have another friend, 80 meetings to get 1 yes. But these are businesses that were developed to the point where they had revenue, they had customers, and everything else. So I'm saying, you should absolutely do all the right things before you even contemplate raising capital. Then once you've done that, just don't expect, to kind of walk in, meet the VC or the angel and walk out of there with a big check. You're going to have to do more than one in most cases. And that number should not be 700, but it's probably going to be more than 10.
So 3 thoughts that came from all of this and I think is relevant. First one is we invest in a company called Founders Suite. Founders Suite is for founders to do a lot of the SaaS activities they need to do, including finding investors. They have a Trello-like board for managing your pipeline. You don't have to use a spreadsheet for this, number one. Number 2 is fundamentally businesses are about changing people's behavior. If you're going to change people's behavior, the change has to be sufficient that you can monetize it, but not so much that they stop doing it in a while. I suspect no one in this room checked into Foursquare tonight. No. Go back 3-4 years, everybody would have checked in, and someone's like, I'm the mayor, right? That change in behavior was too much. Foursquare became 3Square, 2Square, and yeah.
No square?
Well, it's a database business now because they're doing it. Yeah, right, exactly. So you want a change in behavior. And the way to think about it, the paradigm I use here is, and this is not meant to be rude about people, but people are lazy and they just want to have fun. And if you think about that, then you start look at Tinder. Tinder, it's easier to do this than to do this. Right? And they just want to look at pictures, I think. I don't know, I'm married to them. But if you think about it, if you can do something in 2 keystrokes rather than 1, 2 touches rather than 1, that's what people are looking for. So think about that. And I think it's really important as you think about your product and how people can engage with it, that's what you need to do. And then the third thing is, do your diligence. We're investing in 74 companies. They're generally listed on our website. Don't come to us with a competitor. Don't send us the deck of a competitor. We don't want that. We don't want to have a meeting. Now, some other VCs do, but we don't. But do your work to work out who you want to talk to. And then when you get close, right, where there's interest and diligence the VC. Talk to people where there's been problems. Every VC portfolio has problems. And how did they react? Did they suddenly lose their BlackBerry? For those of you who know what BlackBerries are. Did they get dial tone? Now for some VCs that's a strategy because they only know 10% of the portfolio is going to work, so why spend time on the other 90%? If a company stubs their toe, they stub their toe, it's their problem. We take a different approach, which is why somewhere about 50-60% of our seed deals get to a Series B. We often step up, but we will not even talk price and terms with someone until they've diligenced us and decide if they want to work with us. Because, money we don't think is equal, and if the entrepreneurs think it is equal, then it's probably not a good match for us, because they're not going to take feedback and listen. Doesn't mean they have to follow what we say, we're often wrong, but we need to have a conversation. We need to talk about it, we need to share. Elsewise, we should cut checks and say, call us in 10 years if we don't think we can affect the outcome, which we think we can. I think that's the same with yourself. So I think diligencing is very important. Those were the 3.
So let's do a quick lightning round. What shouldn't entrepreneurs do when they're looking for VC? Quick sound bites from each of you. Just
wear a suit.
I fail.
Don't say, when I raise the money, I'll start doing X.
David?
Send completely non-personalized mass emails.
Haley, another one.
Ooh, I wasn't ready for the second round. I have a lot of them.
You have them.
Send an NDA. Look, understand the process. I mean, I don't want to call out a particular accelerator here, but they were very into sending out video little videos of companies rather than a deck. Like, why do you want to force a process on people who work in a deck consuming process? We look at 50 deals a week.